सतर्क रहिए।
Hello and welcome to this special weekly show called Diaspora Diamonds, which is our salute to over 32 million strong Indian diaspora present in over 200 countries worldwide. I'm Gautam Roy. We're launching this show around the time the 17th Pravasi Bharatiya Divas convention has just been held in Madhya Pradesh's Indore city. PBD provides a platform for the overseas Indian community to engage with the government and people of India and share their experiences and insights. It also helps strengthen ties between India and global Indian diaspora and to help recognize the achievements and contributions of Indians living abroad. The Pravasi Bharatiya Samman awards are an integral part of the biennial event and are conferred by the President of India upon members of the Indian diaspora who made exceptional contribution in their chosen fields and have acted as India's ambassadors in foreign lands. Our inaugural episode is an interaction with one such recipient this year, Piyush Gupta, recipient Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Awards and Group CEO, DBS Bank. Welcome to Diaspora Diamonds, Piyush. And congratulations on the award.
Sorry.
To begin with, could you share with us what went through your mind when you first learnt that you've been picked this year for this outstanding recognition by the Indian government?
Well, it was obviously a bit of a surprise. Did not anticipate it. But I think it's fair to say it's quite an honor. So I was pleased with the recognition. But as I reflect, and I reflected on this issue, it's really as much a recognition for the company that I'm part of as a recognition for me as a person. Because really the DBS platform has given me an opportunity to be able to make a contribution in the industry, to make a contribution to Singapore where I live, but also in recent years make a meaningful contribution back to India where I hail from. So there's tremendous sense of gratitude about having the opportunities to be able to contribute. There's also a real sense of gratitude which comes from just my upbringing. Most of us who grew up in India and owe a lot, whether it's to the quality of education, the environment, a whole bunch of other factors that helped us get to where we are today.
Great. And how did the family feel about it, those at home in Singapore and those back home in India as well?
You can imagine they're excited. I have elderly parents hitting 90. And for them, this is obviously quite prestigious. It's an honor. So I think they were quite chuffed about it too.
Well, I hope they have a longer life and see you achieve much bigger things going forward as well. But how do you look back at your own journey which has brought you to this juncture where your contributions to business are being recognized in your motherland in such a glittering fashion?
Well, I've sometimes called myself an accidental banker. I grew up in New Delhi. My father was a bureaucrat, and the agenda was to take the civil services examination and maybe wind up being a diplomat. I went and got a MBA degree at Ahmedabad as a safety net. And as things happened, I stumbled into banking. Turned out it was the best decision I made because it was a discipline which was made for me, for my skill sets. It's a general management discipline, working with people, having a strategic orientation, being hands-on, all of these count for a lot. So I worked with an international bank in India for 8-10 years, who then posted me to Singapore. And then the last 30 years, I've been in East Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore itself, Hong Kong, and so on. Some 10-15 years ago, I moved out to that international bank and found myself as CEO of DBS. It's a great platform, and the timing was propitious. It was 2009-10. We have in the last decade being able to use this platform to build a nice business. We've been recognized as the world's best bank now 5 years running. We've been recognized as the world's best digital bank. But perhaps most important, we've been able to make meaningful impact on customers, on communities, on countries in which we operate. We are in 19 or 20 countries, mostly in East Asia. So yeah, it's been quite a rewarding journey.
Wonderful. And you are a diplomat of sorts, aren't you now, an ambassador of India, so to speak. Now, Tell us about your initial days. You come from Meerut, and when you were young, did you ever think that you will move abroad in the way that you did, settle down in a foreign land, and yet contribute in such a way that it gets the highest recognition that India can give for an Indian living abroad?
I got them actually to make a correction. I was born in a small village called Mawana near Meerut. I'm not from Meerut because I grew up in Delhi, really. And that's important because, like I said, this is the 1970s. My dad was a bureaucrat. And to me, the big dream was to become a diplomat and ambassador of India and go see the world. I was always fascinated by the opportunity to be able to travel to different countries, different parts of the planet. So yeah, you could argue in one way I had this dream of being international. However, as I mentioned earlier, the possibility of making banking my career and using banking as a platform to go overseas was certainly not in my frame of reference. As I look back though, the international exposure, working in multiple countries, this has been fascinating. And 15 years ago, I chose to, become a Singaporean. And this gives me in some ways a great perspective because I'm now a citizen of Singapore, but I'm still very intimately linked back to my roots back in India. As I said, my family, my parents, siblings, etc., still reside there. Our business in India is quite large, and so it keeps taking me back from a professional standpoint, in addition to my personal interests as well.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm correct, you've been in Singapore since 1991 now, so it's safe to say that you're more than well settled there. But I'm sure it must have been quite a challenge when you made that move, or was it fairly smooth and uneventful?
Actually, Gautam, I tell people, Singapore is Asia 101. It is a country where everything works, it's smooth, efficient, and relatively painless. So I have to say that from a physical creature comfort standpoint, the physical accoutrements of moves is not a problem at all. When you come from India in particular, there's a large Indian community, the diaspora is large, there's a lot of cultural affinity. So you don't have any of those usual kinds of challenges you would get in moving into completely alien climates. Now, having said that, it is also true that people think and function and work very differently in every country that you go to. And therefore, what's taken for granted in India does not necessarily fly well in Singapore and vice versa. In fact, so it does take you time to get accustomed to the way of doing things, to the mores, to the culture nuance. And I found that that's true not just in my original move to Singapore. When I moved to Indonesia some years later, I found the same thing as well. Indonesian people are very gentle. You cannot be direct with them as you can with people in India. And when I moved to Hong Kong, there was a completely different attributes as well. So I genuinely believe that moving internationally, you have to be sensitive to nuance, local culture, local environment. That is not easy. At the same time, I have to hasten to add, India prepares you for this extraordinarily well. We think we're a single country, a unified country, but in reality, if you reflect on your growing up, you wind up meeting with all kinds of people. People speak different languages. People are from different social strata. People are from different religious backgrounds. So your capacity to adapt, your capacity to be able to mix and match, that gets honed and developed very early in life. And that helps you a lot when you're actually moving from country to country as well.
Certainly. Well, India and Singapore have a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement, that is a SECA, and a strategic relationship agreement as well. They're partners in multiple ways, and your organization is also a big part of it. Can you tell us a little bit about DBS's operations in India and how it has been contributing in strengthening India-Singapore relations even further?
Well, our operations in India are doing really well. We've been in India for some years. In 2007, we got a banking license. But I think the big story is the last 5-7 years, and I'll break that into 3 instances. The first, we launched the first digital bank in India in 2016. It was the first for us at DBS. We chose India as a pilot market, but it was also the first in the market in India. It was, no paper, completely digital, leveraging the India stack, leveraging Aadhaar, leveraging the UPI system. And that's been really good for us. It's given us reach and presence in the country. The second instance is really our becoming a local wholly owned subsidiary. One of the only, perhaps the only foreign bank which decided to subsidize in India with local governance. And that gave us the opportunity to be able to scale. We were able to acquire and integrate Lakshmi Vilas Bank a couple of years ago. And that gave us a nice footprint of 500-600 branches. A lot of them are in South India.
That's when you got into retail as well.
We are the largest bank, foreign bank in the country. So that's been doing quite well as well.
Great.
So substantial capital invested in India. Our fastest growing business in the last couple of years. We're quite bullish on our prospects in the country.
Wonderful. And with the Lakshmi Vilas, you also got into retail banking, which was not something that you guys were doing earlier.
Well, that's true. Our digital foray was in retail banking, but we found that pure digital is hard to make work. And so with Lakshmi Vilas Bank, we're now in what I call phygital, a mix of a physical presence and a digital overlay.
Great. Now, what sort of progress do you see India and Singapore making in their relationship in the coming 5 to 10 years?
I'm very constructive on the possibilities, both economic, but more than that. As you know, our relationship goes back decades. India, I think, was the second country to recognize Singapore in '65 when Singapore became independent. And the relationship is quite warm because, like I said, the people-to-people contacts, the presence of the diaspora, that goes back to the 17th and 18th century. I was fortunate that, in the middle of last year, I was able to participate in an interministerial session, all-day session, which included some private sector folks from Singapore and from India getting together as well. And as we got together through the day, it became quite evident to both sides that there is tremendous opportunity and complementary strengths between Singapore and India as you look forward. India has got tremendous source of talent. Frankly, in our own company, we have a big technology unit in Hyderabad, 5,000 people. And I tell people, that's not Foxconn for us, that's Apple. Our source of innovation, creativity, development is today increasingly in India. So I think there's a talent advantage. And India is obviously a massive marketplace. Singapore, on the other hand, is a tremendous source of financial capital, as well as human capital. And Singapore is a great place to access East Asia, as Indian companies are now looking at ASEAN and potentially further out as marketplaces in which to operate. Singapore is a great spot from which to be able to do that. So there is a complementarity in strengths. There's also a complementarity in agenda. Singapore is increasingly looking at India as a big opportunity to be able to grow, to balance the US-China sensitivities. And similarly, under the Honorable Prime Minister, India is increasingly articulating a looking strategy as well. So I do think in terms of intent, there's complementarity too.
And the digital rupee will also help there.
Well, it will. So I think some of the things we're doing, we've got a digital payment capability between Singapore's Pay Now and the UPI system. You'll find this year you can make payments into India from India using mobile phone numbers. Once you get that, then electronic linkages, whether for the trade account, trade, digital rupee, as you suggest, all of these are things that we can work on. By the way, I should also mention, the startup ecosystem across both countries is also another area that we can work very closely together. It is thriving. So a lot of Indian startups are headquartering themselves out of Singapore, and a lot of Singapore and East Asian companies are also looking at India as an opportunity.
Great. I don't know if you know that, but I also have a show on startups. It's a weekly show again on startups that I do on DD India. It'll be great to have you on that show as well sometime down the line to talk about this ecosystem. But tell us a little bit more about the Indian diaspora there in Singapore. How is it further enriching Singapore, not just financially, commercially, trade-wise and all that, but culturally, bringing a little bit of India, in fact, a lot of India really in terms of the kind of diaspora we have there, to Singapore?
Well, Indian culture has very long historic roots in Singapore. The South Indian dance forms, Bharatanatyam, but also, Kathak, Kuchipudi, etc., are well known over here. The Singapore schools of art and music are very heavily entrenched in the Indian heritage and roots. In recent years, that's actually been getting a lot more attention. And it's not just traditional forms of culture. Recent years, Bollywood and the new Indian culture is making its presence felt as well. There is no major meaningful show, whether it's theatre or stand-up comedy or music or movies that don't show up in Singapore very, very rapidly. It's also true for the art form. Many well-known Indian artists, lesser-known Indian artists also increasingly come and display their work in this part of the world, Singapore-centric. Perhaps most important, I mentioned before, people to people. You know, Singapore, if you look back 100 years, was mostly Tamil Nadu, Kerala, maybe Andhra. Today, the diaspora, Indian diaspora in Singapore is very broadly represented. It's the Gujaratis, it's the Punjabis, it's people from every part of the country. And when they come here and mix, they bring a little bit of themselves, their cuisine, their food, their habits. It's a genuine melting pot, and it now increasingly represents every part of India.
Great. It's not telling on your physique, but tell us about your experience of the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas convention as well. I'm sure you keep traveling to India frequently, and there's lots that excite you about it, but I'm sure the visit this time around must have been even more special.
Well, it was more special, and Gautam, let me tell you, the first thing that was special was the city of Indore. And I haven't been to Indore. I've read, of course, there's the cleanest city in India 6 years running. And the first impact is massive. I mean, it is without a doubt so clean.
And you're from Singapore, which is one of the cleanest places in the world.
I'm from Singapore. I ran into people who are picking up garbage from the street and putting it in their pockets. That's the amount of civic pride that's been created in Indore.
Great.
So that's fantastic. The second thing, which I sort of knew peripherally, but it came home to me, is the quality of food and cuisine. The street food in Indore is remarkable. I spent time in, Chappan and in Sarafa market and so on, just mouth-watering stuff. But the thing that really overwhelmed me was not these two. It was the friendliness of the people. I have to say, I would vote for Indore being the friendliest city in India. And people were grabbing you in the streets and taking you to, feed you food and snacks just because they figured you were a Pravasi Bharati. It was just very, very special.
Well, I'm sure you get a lot of it there in Singapore as well, but I don't know if you managed to carry some namkeen from Indore, because that's what Indore is very well known for. Now, how do you see India in 2023, given that the theme of this year's PBD was Diaspora, Reliable Partners for India's Progress in Amrit Kal? Prime Minister Modi has given the call to make India a developed nation by 2047. What impression will you be taking, or have you taken back with you, of the country, given what you've seen and experienced in Indore being part of the PBD convention? We spoke a bit about it earlier as well, but a little bit more on this theme.
Gautam, I'm very constructive on India. I think this decade is truly India's decade. First of all, many of the things that have been happening over the last 7-8 years are beginning to come together very nicely. The policy frameworks, whether it is the GST framework or the bankruptcy code reform or ERA, those are beginning to settle down. The soft and hard infrastructure, you can see it in the ports, the roads, the airports. You can see it in Aadhaar, UPI, direct benefits transfer. The focus on manufacturing, the productivity-linked incentives are making a difference.
Yes.
You can see it in the fact that our clients from East Asia are for the first time looking at setting up manufacturing bases in India. So there are a lot of things coming together which I'm genuinely very constructive on. I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Oh, definitely. India has carried out a wide range of impactful economic reforms as well in recent years. The digital revolution is something that has captured the imagination of the entire world, especially since India demonstrated its capabilities with how it handled the COVID pandemic using the backbone of its digital goods infrastructure. Where do you see it taking India in the coming years?
I think digitization is going to be India's cutting edge. Given the software industry we have, the technology talent that exists in the country, that's very good. But perhaps more important is the willingness to think horizontally. So today, increasingly in industry after industry, you're seeing people find creative solutions to change the status quo, to change the way work is done. And that's really the hallmark of development. I can see medtech, I can see education tech, I can see many of these other areas where India has typically been handicapped being significantly impacted and improved through this digital transformation, agri-tech. I was so encouraged. I spent time with the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh and with several other government functionaries. The focus on trying to actually get e-government, e-agriculture, e-education they're showing up in states like Madhya Pradesh, it's showing up at the city level in the way work is done. So I do think that this could be quite impactful for the country as we go forward.
Superb. Now, India is already the 5th largest economy in the world. It's just a matter of a few more years that it will become the 3rd largest as well. What do you think is required to ensure that the maximum number of people reap the benefits of this economic progress in an equitable manner?
I think you nailed it, Gautam. I think getting to number 5 and number 3 is good, but it's the wrong metric. The metric we should be worried about is per capita or medium incomes, perhaps not even per capita. And so the challenge is really there. There is a high degree of inequity in the system. And without a doubt, the country needs to continue buffering and beefing up the social safety nets. Now, this is one of the things, again, which the current administration has done a good job of. The social agenda, particularly on education, sanitation, water supplies, there's a direct benefit transfer, like I said earlier. These are good schemes. They just need to continue to get attention. The big challenge the country will have, though, is jobs. And jobs are not easy to come by. And therefore, the thrust has got to be entrepreneurship. Certainly. How do you create risk-taking capacity and a willingness in our youth to actually be more entrepreneurial? Because organized jobs, as we used to know them, are going to be more and more scarce in the world of the future.
Well, yes, definitely you are quite right about that, and we hope to make progress on those fronts with the kind of momentum that has been set. And thank you so much for joining us to talk about it, talk about your experience, where you are and what you think of India from where you are as one of its ambassadors. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to have joined you, brother.
Well, that was the inaugural edition of this show, Diaspora Diamonds, right here on DD India. Do let us know what you thought of it, what more you'd like to see on it, and keep watching DD India.